You're not overthinking, you're seeing what others refuse to see. And that's why you're alone. You walk into a room full of people and you feel it immediately. The distance. Not because you're awkward, not because you're shy, but because while they talk about surface things, your mind is somewhere else entirely. You're analyzing, connecting, questioning. You notice the tone behind their words, the tension in their smile, the lie they don't even know they're telling. And you say nothing, because explaining what you see would make you the problem. So you nod, you smile, you play along, but inside, you're exhausted. Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, separate from the collective. But here's what he didn't say loudly enough. Individuation is lonely. Deep thinkers don't fit into tribes. You question the rules others follow blindly. You see patterns in chaos. You feel the weight of things unsaid. And society punishes that. Not with violence, with isolation. You're not invited to the shallow conversations. You're not included in the group chat. You're labeled as intense or too much or weird. But the truth? You're awake in a world that prefers to sleep. And sleep is comfortable. Waking up is not. Most people think in straight lines. A leads to B, B leads to C. Simple, clean, safe. But you think in spirals. You see how A connects to Z, loops back to D, and creates a pattern no one else noticed. Your mind doesn't rest. It hunts. It hunts for meaning, for truth, for the hidden structure beneath the surface. Schopenhauer understood this. He said the world is driven by a blind will, an endless, meaningless force. But the thinker sees through it. And once you see through it, you can't unsee it. Here's what no one tells you. Being intelligent is a curse disguised as a gift. You were told your whole life that being smart would make you successful, happy, respected. They lied. Intelligence makes you dangerous. Not to others, to yourself. Because the more you understand, the more you realize how little anyone else cares to understand. You see people lie to themselves every day. You watch them choose comfort over truth. You see them build entire lives on delusions. And you can't join them, because you tried. You tried to care about the things they care about. You tried to laugh at jokes that aren't funny. You tried to believe in things that don't make sense. But your mind wouldn't let you. And now you're standing outside the circle, watching everyone else dance to a song you can't even hear. Nietzsche called it amor fati. Love your fate. But how do you love a fate that feels like exile? Deep thinkers operate on a different frequency. While others are satisfied with answers, you're obsessed with questions. Why do people believe what they believe? What are they protecting when they refuse to think deeper? How do systems of control stay invisible to those inside them? You're not just thinking, you're dissecting, and that makes people uncomfortable. Because when you ask real questions, you expose real lies. Machiavelli understood power. He knew that those who see the game clearly are either players or threats. And if you're not playing, you're the threat. So people push you away. Not consciously, but instinctively. They feel your awareness. And it terrifies them, because you're a mirror. And mirrors show what people spend their whole lives trying to hide. Most people avoid pain. You run toward it. Not because you're masochistic, but because you know pain is where truth lives. Comfort breeds delusion. Pain breeds clarity. You've sat with your darkest thoughts. You've faced your own contradictions. You've questioned your beliefs, your identity, your purpose. And that's why you can't relate to people who haven't. They're still hiding, still pretending, still performing. You stopped performing a long time ago. And now you're left with something most people never touch. Reality. Raw. Unfiltered. Uncomfortable. Schopenhauer said suffering is the essence of life. That the will to live is itself a source of endless pain. You feel that. You live that. But you also know something he didn't emphasize enough. Suffering without awareness is meaningless. Suffering with awareness is power. Let's say it plainly. You scare people. Not because you're aggressive. Not because you're cruel. But because you see them. You see their insecurities. Their fears. Their masks. And they know it. They feel it in the way you listen. In the way you pause. In the way you respond with something they didn't expect. You make them feel seen. And for most people, being seen is the most terrifying thing in the world. So they avoid you. They label you. They create distance. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your presence demands something they're not ready to give. Honesty. Jung called it the shadow, the hidden part of the self that people deny. But you've already met your shadow. You've shaken its hand. You've learned its language. And now when you meet someone, you can see their shadow too. That's not a superpower. That's a sentence. Because once you see the shadow, you can't pretend it's not there. So what do you do with this? You stop apologizing for your depth. You stop pretending to be less aware than you are. You stop dimming your mind to make others comfortable, because the cost of fitting in is betraying yourself. And you've already paid that price. You've already felt the emptiness of playing small. Here's the shift. Stop looking for people who think like you. Start looking for people who respect how you think. There's a difference. Someone who thinks like you is rare, maybe impossible, but someone who respects your depth, they exist. They might not go as deep, but they won't punish you for going there. They won't call you cold, or dark, or too much. They'll call you real, and that's worth waiting for. Most people fear silence. You crave it, because silence is where the noise stops and the truth begins. You don't need constant distraction. You don't need validation from a crowd. You need space, time, solitude. Not because you're antisocial, but because your mind processes differently. While others recharge through people, you recharge through thought. While others fear being alone with themselves, you fear being surrounded by people who aren't really there. Nietzsche said, "The lonely one offers his hand too quickly to whomever he encounters." You've learned that lesson the hard way. You've given your depth to people who couldn't hold it. And now you're more careful, more selective, more guarded. Not because you're closed off, but because you know the cost of opening up to the wrong person. Here's the part that hurts. You will lose people because of how you think. Friends will fade. Relationships will end. Doors will close. Not because you're toxic, but because you outgrew the roles they needed you to play. They wanted the version of you that agreed. That didn't challenge. That stayed small. But you can't be that anymore. And they can't forgive you for it. Machiavelli said, "Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception." But you're done deceiving. You're done pretending. And that makes you incompatible with a world built on pretending. You'll be called arrogant, distant, cold. Let them, because the alternative is betraying the one person you can't afford to lose, yourself. Deep thinking is not a disorder. It's a design. Your mind is built to question, to analyze, to see beyond the obvious. And yes, that comes with pain, with loneliness, with alienation, but it also comes with something most people never experience: sovereignty. You are not controlled by the narratives others accept. You are not enslaved by comfort. You are not afraid of your own mind. Jung said the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, but he left out the cost. The cost is everything. Everyone you thought you'd keep. Every place you thought you'd belong. Every version of yourself you thought was real. You pay it all. And what's left? You. Unfiltered. Undiluted. Unbroken. Most people want certainty. You've made peace with ambiguity. You know that life doesn't have neat answers. That people are contradictions. That truth is layered, not linear. And that makes you uncomfortable to be around. Because you don't offer easy comfort. You don't give fake reassurance. If someone asks you a question, you give them the real answer. Not the one that makes them feel better. The one that's true. And most people aren't ready for that. They want to be told they're right. That they're good. That everything will work out. But you can't lie like that. Not anymore. Schopenhauer said compassion is the basis of morality. But you've learned something deeper. Real compassion is honesty, even when it hurts. So here's what you need to understand. Your depth is not a flaw. It's the price of awareness. And awareness is the only real freedom you have. You cannot unknow what you know. You cannot unsee what you've seen. But you can stop apologizing for it. Stop explaining yourself to people who will never understand. Stop trying to translate your mind into a language they can accept. Your depth is your power. Not in a loud way. Not in a performative way. But in a quiet, undeniable way. You see what others miss. You feel what others avoid. You think what others fear. And that makes you rare. Not broken, rare. The world doesn't need more people who agree. It needs more people who think. And you're one of them. But let's be clear. This path doesn't get easier. You will still feel alone. You will still be misunderstood. You will still question if it's worth it. And in those moments, you'll be tempted to go back. To play the game. To wear the mask. To pretend you're like everyone else. Don't. Because the moment you betray your awareness, you lose the only thing that makes you you. Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Your why is this: to live in truth, to refuse the comfortable lie, to honor the mind you were given, even if it costs you everything. Because the alternative, living asleep, living small, living pretend, is not living at all. It's just waiting to die. Most people are terrified of their own thoughts. You've learned to trust yours. Not blindly, not arrogantly, but with a quiet certainty that comes from years of interrogating yourself. You've questioned your beliefs. You've challenged your biases. You've sat with your darkness. And you've come out the other side knowing this. Your mind is not your enemy. Your mind is the only thing that's truly yours. Everything else can be taken. Your relationships, your status, your certainty. But your mind, your awareness, that stays. And that's where your power lives. Here's how you move forward. You stop waiting for permission to be who you are. You stop waiting for someone to validate your depth. You stop waiting for the world to catch up. Because it won't. The world moves at the speed of comfort. And you're moving at the speed of truth. Those speeds don't match. So you build your life around your depth, not in spite of it. You find work that challenges your mind. You create space for solitude. You protect your energy from people who drain it. And yes, you'll still feel lonely. But loneliness is not the same as being lost. You know exactly where you are. You know exactly who you are. And that clarity is worth the solitude. Jung said, loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. You felt that. But here's the reframe. Maybe the things that are important to you aren't meant to be communicated. Maybe they're meant to be lived. So let me leave you with this. You are not too much. You are exactly enough for the few people who are ready to meet you at your depth. Everyone else, they were never your people. And that's okay. Because you're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to honor the mind you were given, to see clearly, to think deeply, to refuse the lies that keep everyone else comfortable. The world will call that cold. Call it dark. Call it dangerous. Let them, because you know something they don't. The deepest thinkers are not the loneliest people. They're the freest. And freedom always looks like isolation to those still locked in cages. You're not lost. You're awake. And that's the most terrifying, most beautiful thing you could ever be.